Start.
Welcome and welcome again. You're still here at the Real Vibes History with many more to come. Please, please understand that. But we're here again, and I'm here with my two brothers again, Mr. Uriah and Mr. KW, and we're going to be reading for you um, freshly from Alexander Hislop or Hyslop, the two Babylons. If you are a Bible reader or an appreciator of mythology and the truth behind paganism, this is a book for you. Um, Especially those people in this truth, allegedly. Okay? So I'm about to do the introduction. And of course, after I introduce myself now, I'll let the brothers introduce themselves and we're about to get in. I'm Meshach Poe Life, and I'm here with.
Here we
Yeah, I'm Noms or Uriah.
That's the flame of the Most High.
That's it.
And I'm KW. We're back again. Two Babylons, page 103.
Let's get it. So, introduction. Um, Two Babylons by Alexander Hyslop. And upon her forehead was a name written: Mystery Babylon the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Revelations 17:5. There is this great difference between the works of men and the works of the Most High God. That the same minute and searching investigation, which displays the defects and imperfections of the one, brings out also the beauties of the other. If the most finely polished needle on which the art of man has been expanded be subjected to a microscope, many inequalities, much roughness and clumsiness will be seen. But if the microscope be brought to bear on the flowers of the field, no such result which appears instead of their beauty, diminishing new beauties, and still more delicate that have escaped the naked eye, are forthwith discovered beauties that make us appreciate in any way which otherwise we could have had little conception of the full force of the Most High's saying. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Mm-mm-mm. Matthew 6 and 28 and 29, that was from. The same law appears also in comparing the word of the Most High God and the most finished productions of men. There are spots and blemishes, and in the most admired productions of human genius, but the more the scriptures are searched and the more minutely they are studied, the more their perfection appears. Ain't that some truth, brothers? New beauties are brought into light every day, and discoveries of science, the researches of the learned, and the labors of the infidels, all alike conspire to illustrate the wonderful harmony of all parts and the divine beauty that clothes the whole. If this be the case with scripture in general, it is especially the case with prophetic scripture, as every spoke in the will of as every spoke in the will of providence revolves the prophetic symbols starts into still more bold and beautiful relief. This is very strikingly the case with the prophetic language that forms the groundwork and cornerstone of the present work. There never has been any difficulty in the mind of any enlightened Protestant in identifying the woman sitting on seven mountains and having on her forehead the name written Mystery Babylon the Great. With the Roman apostasy, no other city in the world has ever been celebrated as the city of Rome has, for its situation on seven hills. Pagan poets and orators who had not thought of elucidating prophecy have alike characterized it as the seven-hilled city. Thus, Virgil refers to it. Rome has both become the most beautiful city in the world and alone has surrounded for itself seven heights with a wall. Propertius, in the same strain, speaks of it, only adding another trait, which completes the apocalyptic picture. The lofty city on seven hills, which governs the whole world, it's governing the whole world, is just the counterpart of the divine statement which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Revelations 17 and 18. To call Rome the city of seven hills was by its citizen held to be as descriptive as to call it by its own proper name. Hence, Horace speaks of it by reference to his seven hills alone when he addressed the gods who have set their affection on the seven hills. Marshall, in like manner, speaks of the seven dominating mountains in times long subsequent. The same kind of language was in current use for when Symmachus, the prefect of the city and the last acting pagan pontifex Maximus, as the imperial substitute, introduces by letter one of his to another. He calls him de septem montibus virum, a man from the seven mountains, meaning thereby, as the commentators interpret, Kivem Romanum, a Roman citizen. Now, oh yeah, the C is a K in the Roman language, just like in the Greek one. This characteristics of Rome has ever been marked well, and define it has always been easy to show that the church which has its seat and headquarters on the seven hills of Rome might most appropriately be called Babylon, inasmuch as it is the chief seat of idolatry under the New Testament of Yahweh Shai Mashiach Osana, aka Jesus Christ. As the ancient Babylon was the chief seat of idolatry under the old but recent discoveries in Assyria taken in connection with the previously known but ill understood history and mythology of the ancient world demonstrate that there is a vast deal more significant in the name Babylon the Great than this. It has been known all along the popery was baptized paganism. It has been known all along that popery was baptized paganism. But the Most High Yahweh is not making it manifest that paganism which Rome has baptized is in all its essential elements the very paganism which prevailed in the ancient literal Babylon when Yahweh opened before Cyrus the two leaved gates of The two-leaved gates of brass and cut in asunder bars of iron. The name and unexpected light is the name and unexpected light in some way or other should be cast about this very period on the church of the grand apostasy, the very language and symbols of the apocalypse which might have prepared us to anticipate in the apocalyptic visions. It is just before the judgment upon her that for the first time John sees the apostate, which with the name Babylon the Great written on her forehead. Revelation 17 and 5. What means the writing of the name on her forehead? Does it not naturally indicate that just before judgment overtakes her, her real character was to be so thoroughly developed that everyone who has eyes to see, who has the least spiritual discernment, would be compelled, as it were, on ocular demonstration to recognize the wonderful fitness of the title which the Spirit of the Most High had affixed to affixed to her. Her judgment is now evidently hasting on, and just as it approaches the providence of the Most High God, conspiring with the word of the Most High God by light pouring in all from by light pouring in all from all quarters, makes it more and more evident that Rome is in very deed the Babylon of the apocalypse, that the essential character of her system, the grand objects of her worship, her festivals, her doctrine and discipline, her rites and ceremonies, her priesthood, and her orders have all been derived from ancient Babylon, and finally, that the Pope himself is truly and properly the lineal representative of Belshazzar. Just, I believe that's one of Nimrod's altars, but you could take it, you could take the connotation and the meaning of what Belshazzar means all the way back to Christian Ham, and possibly with the pagans before the flood. In the warfare that has been waged against the domineering pretensions of Rome, it has too often been counted enough merely to set aside her presumptuous boast that she is the mother and mistress of all churches, and the one Catholic Church of whose pale there is no salvation, if ever there was excuse for such a mode of dealing with her. Excuse withhold no longer. If the position I have laid down can be maintained, she must be stripped of the name of a Christian church altogether, for it was a church of Christ that was convened on that night when the pontiff king of Babylon, in the midst of his thousand lords, praised the gods of gold and silver and of wood and of stone. In Daniel 5 to in Daniel chapter 5 to 4, then the Church of Rome is entitled to the name of a Christian church, but not otherwise. This to some no doubt will appear a very startling position, but it is one which is the object of this work to establish, and let the reader judge for himself whether I do not bring ample evidence on the substantiate my position. Brother Moms,
Thank you, Reverend Mashak Paul. One, distinctive character of two systems. In leading proof of the Babylonian character of the Papal Church, the first point to which I solicit the readers Attention is the character of mystery, which attaches alike to the modern Roman and the ancient Babylonian systems. The gigantic system of moral corruption and adultery described in this passage under the emblem of a woman with a golden cup in her hand, Revelation chapter 17, verse 4, making all nations drunk with the wine of her fornication. Revelation 17 to chapter 17, verse 2, and chapter 18, verse 3, is divinely called Mystery Babylon the Great. Revelation chapter 17 to 5. That Paul's mystery of iniquity, as described in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7, has its counterpart in the Church of Rome. No man of candid mind who has carefully examined the subject can easily doubt. Such was the impression made by that account on the mind of the great Sir Matthew Hale. No mean judge of evidence that he used to say that if the apostolic description were inserted in the public hue or cry, any constable in the realm would be warranted in seizing wherever he found him. The Bishop of Rome, as the head of that mystery iniquity, as the system here described, is equally characterized by the name of mystery. It may be presumed that both passages refer to the same system, but the language applied to the New Testament Babylon, as the reader cannot fail to see, naturally leads us back to the Babylon of the ancient world. As the apocalyptic woman has in her hand a cup wherewith she intoxicates the nations, so was it with the Babylon of old. Of that Babylon, while in all its glory, the Most High thus spake in denouncing its doom by the prophet Jeremiah. Babylon had been a golden cup in the Most High's hand, that made all the earth drunk. The nations have drunken of her wine. Therefore, the nations are mad. Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 7. Why is this exact similarity of language in regard to the two systems? The natural inference surely is that the one stands to the other in the relation of type and antitype. As the Babylon of the Apocalypse is characterized by the name of mystery, so is the grand distinguishing feature of the ancient Babylonian system was the Chaldean mysteries that form so essential a part of that system. To these mysteries, the very language of the Hebrew prophet symbolically, though of course it is distinctly alludes when he speaks of Babylon as a golden cup to drink of mysterious beverages, says Salvetti, was indispensable on the part of all who sought initiation in these mysteries. These mysterious beverages were composed of wine, honey, water, and flour. From the ingredients avowedly used, and from the nature of others not avowed, but certainly used, there can be no doubt that they were of an intoxicating nature, and until the aspirants had come under their power, until their understanding had been dimmed, and their passions excited by the medicated draught, they were not duly prepared for what they were either to hear or to see. If it be inquired what was the object and design of these ancient mysteries, it will be found that there was a wonderful analogy between them and that mystery of iniquity which is embodied in the Church of Rome. Their primary object was to introduce privately, little by little, under the seal of secrecy and sanction of an oath, what it would not have been safe all at once and openly to propound. What it would not have been safe all at once and openly to propound. The time at which they were instituted proved that this must have been the case. The Chaldean mysteries can be traced up to the days of Semiramis, who lived only a few centuries after the flood, who was known to have impressed upon them the image of her own depraved and polluted mind. That beautiful but abandoned queen of Babylon was not only herself paragon of unbridled lust and licentiousness. But in the mysteries which she had a chief hand in forming, she was worshipped as Rhea, the great mother of the gods, with such atrocities, rites as identified her with Venus, the mother of all impurity, and raised the very city where she had reigned to a bad eminence among the nations, as the grand seat at once of adultery and consecrated prostitution. Thus was this Chaldean queen, a fit and remarkable prototype of the woman in the apocalypse with the golden cup in her hand and the name on her forehead, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of earth. The apocalyptic emblem of the harlot woman with the cup in her hand was even embodied in the symbols of the idolatry derived from ancient Babylon as they were exhibited in Greece. For thus was the Greek Venus originally represented, and it is singularly that in our own day, and so far as appears for the first time, the Roman Church has actually taken this very symbol as her own chosen emblem. In 1825, on occasion of the Jubilee, Pope Leo X, I'm not too sure, I struck a medal bearing on one side his own image and on the other that of the Church of Rome, symbolized as a woman, holding in her left hand a cross, in her right a cup, with the legend around her, Sedat Super Universum. The whole world is her seat. The period where Semiramis lived, a period when the patriarchal faith was still fresh in the minds of men, when Shem was still alive to rouse minds of the faithful to rally around the banner for truth and cause of the Most High, made it hazardous all at once and publicly to set up such a system as was inaugurated by the Babylonian queen. We know from the statements in Job that among patriarchal tribes that had nothing whatever to do with Mosaic institutions, but which adhered to the pure faith of the patriarchs, idolatry in any shape was held to be a crime, to be visited with signal and summary punishment on the heads of those who practiced it. If I beheld the sun, said Job, when it shined, or the moon walking in brightness, and my heart has been secretly enticed, and my mouth has been kissed my hand, this also were an iniquity to be punished by the judge, for I should have been denied the God that is above. Job chapter 31, verse 26 to 28. If this was the case in Job's day, much more must it have been the case at the earlier period, when the mysteries were instituted. It was a matter, therefore, of necessity, if idolatry were to be brought in, and especially such foul idolatry, as the Babylonian system contained in its bosom, that it should be done stealthily and in secret. Even though introduced by the hand of power, it might have produced a revulsion, and violent attempts might have been made by the uncorrupted portion of mankind to put it down, and at all events, if it had appeared at once in all its hideousness, it would have alarmed the conscience of men and defeated the very object in view. That object was to bind all mankind in blind and absolute submission to a hierarchy entirely dependent on the sovereigns of Babylon. In the carrying out this scheme, all knowledge, sacred and profane, came to be monopolized by the priesthood, who dealt it out to those who were initiated in the mysteries, exactly as they saw fit, according as the interest of the grand system of spiritual despotism they had to administer might seem to require. Thus, the people, wherever the Babylonian system spread, were bound neck and heel to the priests. The priests were the only depositaries of religious knowledge. They only had the true tradition by which the rites and symbols of the public religion could be interpreted, and without blind implicit submission to them, what was necessary for salvation could not be known. Compare this with early history of the papacy, and with its spirit and modus operandi throughout, and how exact is this coincidence? Was it in a period of patriarchal light that the corrupt system of Babylonian mysteries began? It was in a period of greater light that that unholy and unscriptural system commenced that has found such rank development in the Church of Rome. It began in the very age of the apostles, when the primitive church was in its flowers, when the glorious fruits of Pentecost were everywhere to be seen, when martyrs were sealing their testimony for truth with their blood. Even then, the gospel shone so brightly, the Spirit of the Most High bore this clear and distinct testimony by Paul. The mystery of iniquity is already at work. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7. That system of iniquity which then began, it was divinely foretold, was to issue in a portentous apostasy that in due time would be awfully revealed and would continue until it should be destroyed by the breath of the Most High's mouth, and consumed by the brightness of his coming. But at its first introduction into the church, it came in secretly and by stealth, with all deceivableness of unrighteousness. It wrought mysteriously under fair but false pretenses, leading men away from the simplicity of the truth as it is in Yahushua, and it did so secretly, for the very same reason that idolatry was secretly introduced in the ancient mysteries of Babylon. It was not safe, it was not prudent to do otherwise. The zeal of the true church, though destitute of civil power, would have aroused itself to put the false system and all its amateurs beyond the pale of Christianity. If it had appeared openly and all at once in all its grossness, and this would have arrested its progress. Therefore it was brought in secretly, and by little and little, one corruption being introduced after another as apostasy produced, and the backsliding church became prepared to tolerate it, until it has reached the gigantic height we see now, when in almost every particular, the system of the papacy is the very antipodes of the system of the primitive church, of the gradual introduction of all that is now most characteristic of Rome. Through the working of the mystery of iniquity, we have very striking evidence, preserved even by Rome itself, in the inscriptions copied from the Roman catacombs. These catacombs are extensive excavations underground in the neighborhood of Rome, in which the Christian times of persecution during the first 3 centuries celebrated their worship and also buried their dead. On some of the tombstones there are inscriptions to be found which are directly in the teeth of now well-known principles and practices of Rome. Take only one example. What, for instance, at this day is a more distinguishing mark of the papacy than the enforced celibacy of the clergy. Yet, from these inscriptions, we have most decisive evidence that even in Rome, there was a time when no such system of clerical celibacy was known. Witness the following, found on different tombs. To Basilius, the Precursor, and Felicitas, his wife. They made this for themselves. To Petronia, a priest's wife, the type of modesty, in this place I lay my bones. Spare your tears, dear husband and daughter, and believe that it is forbidden to weep for one who lives in the Most High. A prayer here and there for the dead. May God refresh your spirit. Proves that even then the mystery of iniquity had begun to work. but inscriptions such as the above equally show that it had been slowly and cautiously working, that up to the period to which they refer, the Roman Church had not proceeded the length it has done now of absolutely forbidding its priests to marry. Craftily and gradually did Rome lay the foundations of its system of priestcraft, on which it was afterwards to rear so vast a superstructure. At its commencement, mystery was stamped upon its system, but this feature of mystery has adhered to it throughout its whole course. When it had once succeeded in dimming the light of the Gospels, God forbid, but obscuring the fullness and freeness of the grace of the Most High, and drawing away the souls of men from direct and immediate dealings with the one grand prophet and high priest of our profession, a mysterious power was attributed to the clergy which gave them dominion over the faith of the people, a dominion directly disclaimed by apostolic men, 2 Corinthians 1 and 24, but which in connection with the confessional has become at least as absolute and complete as was ever possessed by Babylonian priests over these initiated in the ancient mysteries. The clerical power of the Roman priesthood culminated in the erection of the confessional. That confessional was itself borrowed from Babylon. The confession required of the votaries of Rome is entirely different from the confession prescribed in the word of the Most High. The dictate of scriptures in regard to confession is confess your faults to one another, James chapter 5 verse 16, which implies that the priest should confess to the people as well as the people to the priest if either should sin against another. This could never have served any purpose of spiritual despotism, and therefore Rome leaving the word of God has had recourse to the Babylonian system. In that system, secret confession to the priest, according to the prescribed form, was required of all who were admitted to the mysteries, and until such confession had been made, no complete initiation could take place. Thus, does Salvet refer to this confession as observed in Greece, in rites that can only be traced to a Babylonian origin. All the Greeks, from Delphi to Thermopylae, were initiated in the mysteries of the Temple of Delphi. Their silence in regard to everything they were commanded to keep secret was secured both by fear of the penalties threatened to perjured revelation and by the general confession exacted of the aspirants after initiation, a confession which caused them greater dread of the indiscretion of the priest than gave him reason to dread their indiscretion. This confession is also referred to by Potter in his Greek Antiquities, though it has been generally overlooked. In his account of the Eleusinian mysteries, after describing the preliminary ceremonies and instructions before the admission of the candidates for initiation into the immediate presence of the divinities, he thus proceeds. Then the priest that initiated them, called Hierophat, proposed certain questions as whether they were fasted, to which they returned answers in a set form. The etc. here might not strike a casual reader, but is a pregnant etc. and contains a great deal. It means, are you free from every violation of chastity? And that not merely in the sense of moral impurity, but in the factitious sense of chastity, which paganism always cherishes. Are you free from the guilt of murder? For no one guilty of slaughter, even accidentally, could admit until he was purged from blood. And there were certain priests called Koes who heard confessions in such cases and purged the guilt away. The strictness of the inquiries in the pagan confessionals is evidently implied in certain licentious poems of Propertius and Tibullus and Juvenal. Wilkinson, in his chapter on private fast and penance, which he says were strictly informed in connection with certain regulations at fixed periods, has several classical quotations which clearly prove whence popery derived the kind of questions which have stamped that character of obscenity on its confessional as exhibited in the notorious pages of Peter Dens. The pretense under which this auricular confession was required was that the solemnities to which the initiated were to be admitted was so high, so heavenly, so holy that no man with guilt lying on his conscience and sin unpurged could lawfully be admitted to them. For the safety, therefore, of those who were to be initiated, it was held to be indispensable that the officiating priest should thoroughly probe their conscience, lest coming without due purgation from previous guilt contracted, the wrath of the gods should be provoked against the profane intruders. This was the pretense, but when we know the essentially unholy nature both of the gods and their worship, who can fail to see that this was nothing more than a pretense, that the grand object in requiring the candidates for initiation to make confession to the priests of all of their secret faults and shortcomings and sins was just to put them entirely in the power of those to whom the inmost feelings of their souls and their most important secrets were confided. Exactly in the same way, for the very same purpose, has Rome erected the confessional instead of requiring the priests and the people alike, as the scriptures does, to confess their faults to one another. When either have offended the other, Rome commands all, on pain of perdition, to confess to the priest, whether they have transgressed against him or not, while the priest is under no obligation to confess to the people at all. Without such confession in the Church of Rome, there can be no admission to the sacraments any more than in the days of paganism there could be admission without confession to benefit of the mysteries. This confession is made by every individual in secrecy and in solitude to the priest sitting in name and clothed with the authority of God, invested with the power to examine the conscience, to judge the life, to absolve, to condemn according to his mere arbitrary will and pleasure. This is the grand pivot on which the whole mystery of iniquity, as embodied in the papacy, is made to turn, and wherever it is submitted to, admirably does it serve the design of binding men in abject subjection to the priesthood. In conformity with the principle out of which the confessional grew, the church, that is, the clergy, claim to be the sole disputaries of the true faith of Christianity. As the Chaldean priests were believed alone to possess the key to the understanding of the mythology of Babylon, a key handed down to them from primeval and antiquity, so the priests of Rome set up to be the sole interpreters of the scriptures. They only had the true tradition, transmitted from age to age, without which it was impossible to arrive at its true meaning. They therefore require implicit faith in their dogmas. All men were bound to believe as the church believed, while the church in this way could shape its faith as it pleased. As possessing supreme authority also over the faith, they could let out little or much as they judged most expedient, and reserve in teaching the great truths of religion was as essential a principle in the system of Babylon as it is in Romanism or Tractarianism at this day. It was this priestly claim to dominion over the faith of men that imprisoned the truth in unrighteousness in the ancient world, so that darkness covered the earth and gross darkness the people. It was the very same claim in the hands of the Roman priests that ushered in the Dark Ages, And through many a dreary century, the gospel was unlearned, and the Bible a sealed book to millions who bore the name of Yahushua. In every aspect, then, we see how justly Rome bears on its forehead the name Mystery Babylon the Great. That, that is the first chapter of the two Babylons.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Norms.
Thank you for having me on the stream.
That was a great reading, even though you said you struggle with Greek and Roman names and placements, the way they write it, but you did very well, brother. I was enjoying
Thank you.
it.
Thank you. I tried my best. Some of the words were a bit difficult to pronounce, I can't lie, but
All praises to the Most High, though.
for
Hey,
real, all praises, man.
but this is Meshach Poe. That was my brother Uriel, with my brother KW, and that was Two Babylons by Alexander Haslop. And we're gonna hit you with chapter 2 soon. Look out for that one. And you can find us everywhere at The Real Vibes.
Yeah, that's right.
Alright, everybody, that's it. Peace.